Hey, America.
Conservative isn't just a word. It's a movement, a way of life, a set of values that emphasizes our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Liberty and freedom have to be more than just words.
The Conservative Roundtable discusses the conservative movement at the local, state, and national level. Here's your host, Ralph Lorigo, chairman of the...
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to The Patriot. We have a great show for you tonight, or this morning. We are going to salute our veterans. We have with us my favorite veteran, Dr. John Long, a World War II veteran that you'll hear a lot of interesting stuff about. There are only less than 0.5% of World War II veterans still alive. Dr. John Long is 98 years old, has a stellar history to tell us about involvement, patriotism, and all things that are good from the greatest generation. We also have with us, in charge of the local Purple Heart Society, Jim Schaller, who's going to talk to us about what the Purple Heart Society is, how it was formed, what they do, and their purpose. We have Russ Gugino with us, who was the prior chief of staff for Jack Kemp, a very knowledgeable guy involved in politics for decades. And along with me is Nancy Orticelli. She will talk about the Constitutional Coalition, the Western New York chapter. So let's get started. So, John, I'm so happy to have you here with us today to talk about some of your history, to give us some insight into what was certainly the greatest generation. So you're now 98, John?
I just celebrated my 98th birthday, and I'm looking towards the 99th birthday. I have the slogan, 98 and still charging from the gate.
Well, that's fantastic. So I want to know, I want the audience to know a little bit about your background. So you grew up in Buffalo and you attended East High School, is that correct?
Yes, I grew up on the east side of Buffalo and graduated from Buffalo East High School, from which I was drafted into military service in June of 1944.
Before that, so in high school, I understand you played varsity baseball.
That is very true. I played varsity baseball. I enjoyed that game. I played first base. And at that time, upon entering my military service, I was being scouted by the old Brooklyn Dodgers. And I'll never forget that. And, of course, after my military service, I decided to go in a different direction and didn't play any more baseball after that. But that was a great part of my life at that time.
So the great Warren Spahn, you know the great Warren Spahn?
I was very well acquainted with the great Warren Spahn. We played the last high school game I played was against Warren Spahn, and he was pitching at Schiller Park, Genesee Street in Buffalo. And Warren Spahn was one of the greatest pitchers, as everybody knows, that ever existed. And he was just an amazing guy. And in that game, I remember so clearly, I was up to bat 3 times, and I got 2 for 3 hits off of him. I remember both hits went right over second base at that time. It was one of the greatest experiences. And then, of course, we all know he went on to greatness in baseball. And I went in a different direction, yes.
That must have been certainly a memorable experience for you for your entire life, with the celebrity status and the great achievements of the great Warren Spahn. So now, again, tell us, when were you drafted? What happened?
Well, I was drafted right out of high school, and in 1944, and I remember clearly I took the oath of office on the 3rd floor of the old post office building, and I remember clearly within 10, 20 days after that, we were on our way on a troop train down to Fort Dix, New Jersey, which at that time was the reception center. And then after about 10 days there, I found myself on my way down to Camp Wheeler, Georgia, for intensive infantry training. And that's where I received all of my military training at Camp Wheeler, Georgia.
So the training there, was for what purpose?
When we were halfway through that training, we were told that we were being trained, believe it or not, to invade Japan. And, of course, we all know what happened. Harry Truman...
So tell me this, before we get into that. So how many people were there? The training must have been pretty intense, that you're training for an invasion of Japan at that point in time?
Yes, there were 3,000 of us that arrived there all at the same day, all from all around the country. And ironically, none of us knew one another, but within a matter of a week or 10 days, we all knew one another, where we were from. We became close military buddies, and we went through intensive training together. And I don't know how many people are aware of infantry training, but it's all on-the-ground type of things. And we were actually, from day to day, we were just absolutely trained in the work of what an infantryman does. And that's what I ended up with, that designation. Of course, I ended up being a staff sergeant, came out as a staff sergeant, and in charge of a large group of other soldiers at that time.
So the intent, though, was to train you, to prepare you to invade Japan.
That's it, yeah.
That was the intent.
Yes.
Were you aware of it at the time?
And very close to the end of our training, because all of us were very anxious, wondering what we were going to be trained for. We were then informed that was going to be the case, an invasion, of course. And then, as everyone knows, President Truman decided to drop those nuclear bombs. That ended the war, and then, of course, we turned in a whole different direction. They put together what they called the Army of Occupation, and they sent us all over into Germany so that those combat soldiers could come home.
But the story is that Truman, it was estimated that invasion would have cost 1 million lives.
I am very sure and confident that I wouldn't be here today if they had invaded Japan, because we were told that the Japs were terrible fighters, and they never resisted, they never gave up, they never surrendered. And I think that estimate of the number of guys we would have lost is pretty accurate. We would have lost about 1 million people.
So Truman decided that he was unwilling to sacrifice so many lives, and he changed the course of history, didn't he?
He absolutely changed the course of history, and there's hardly a time goes by that I don't think about him making that decision, and it had to be a very, very serious decision for him to make, whoever advisors were, but that decision was made, and I believe it was one of the greatest decisions that President Truman made at that time. I really do.
And saved the lives of
millions of guys, and I feel very confident I would have been one of those that probably didn't return, because in the infantry we just never surrender.
So, what was the feeling back then when you were being prepared to invade Japan? When the reality was that you would probably die in that invasion. What was the feeling of the men that were in that company in terms of patriotism, in terms of what they had to do? And
that's a very good question, because we adopted a slogan among all of us: "'Tis not for us to question why, 'tis only for us to do or die." And that was the basis upon which we proceeded in our military service.
And so those men were willing to perform the ultimate sacrifice.
Yes.
Incredible.
As I was willing to do, and if I had to do it over today again, I would do it without any question.
I wish that was the feeling more broadly today. So after the bomb, Japan surrenders. That ends the war pretty much, and you end up in Germany. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that formed the Army of Occupation, and that's where I served the rest of my military service.
So that allowed a lot of servicemen to return back home.
There's no question about it. That thousands of men were able to return back home, and that was one of the greatest reasons I say that decision by President Truman was probably one of the greatest decisions he ever made.
So tell me a little bit. There's something you told me about that in high school you worked at a pharmacy and you made that work for you when you were in the service. So how was that? What came about?
Well, that's true. When I was in my last year of high school, I worked at a pharmacy, and I became very interested in the healing arts and interested in the pharmaceutical aspects. And at that time, I just decided, after I got through with military service, I had heard an awful lot about the success of chiropractors. And so upon leaving the service, I did a lot of investigation, and I determined that the Palmer College of Chiropractic in Davenport, Iowa, is where I wanted to go. and that is where I decided to go. And I went there under the GI Bill of Rights, and that's another thing I want to say, that our country made that decision to create the GI Bill of Rights, and so many of our veterans utilized that. And I know in my case, I don't know what I would have done without that proceeding and being able to attend the Palmer College of Chiropractic. So that was where I spent the rest of my time preparing to be a practicing chiropractor in the state of New York.
So, as I understand it, you were one of the initial licensed chiropractors in the state of New York. Is that true?
That's very true. At the time that we started practicing in this state, there was no law to regulate the practice of chiropractic in the state. And I and 4 other chiropractors from upstate and downstate put together a legislative committee. And for 5 years, we worked diligently to prepare for legislation to be put before the state legislature to regulate the practice for chiropractic in the state of New York. And that law was eventually passed. And shortly after that, I received an invitation to serve on the very first board of chiropractic examiners in the state of New York, which I did for 6 years. And I still to this day hold license number 4 in the entire state of New York.
License number 4.
Yes.
Congratulations to you. So, how did you get involved in the political aspect?
Well, in the political aspects, as I have mentioned to others, there was no law here to regulate the practice, and I was not comfortable practicing without a law to regulate those chiropractors that wanted to come to the state. And so as I said, again, with 4 or 5 other chiropractors, we put together this program, and we worked diligently with the New York State Legislature in both the state Senate and the Assembly, and we finally got a law put together after conferences with the Medical Society in the state of New York, because it had to have their agreement with the law that was being preferred. And eventually what we did was Nelson Rockefeller was governor at that time, and we got Walter J. Mahoney was the Senate Majority Leader, who's passed away at that time. We got the law passed in the state Senate. It went on to the state Assembly, and I'll never forget the evening that it was being debated in the Assembly. There were some questionable votes out there, which we needed, and I remember the governor coming down from the second floor and lecturing the legislature, and took the vote, and the law was passed, and as a result of that, then that took care of everything, and the law was passed, and the state of New York now has chiropractors here who are all well qualified and must abide by the rules and regulations of that law.
And so tell me about your involvement in Tonawanda and your involvement in the politics in the town of Tonawanda.
Well, I will admit right now I've had this love affair with the town of Tonawanda for all these years, because I consider it to be one of the finest towns that deliver an abundance of services within a framework of fiscal responsibility. And at the time that I was wanting to become chairman for the purpose of doing what I could for the chiropractors, at the same time I didn't realize that I was also becoming very interested in town government and who were the officers and what was going on. And as a result of that, I decided to run to become the town chairman in the town of Tonawanda. And we had a contest, and I won that contest. And I served there then, and I was reelected every 2 years for 10 years. I served as chairman in the town of Tonawanda.
Republican chairman.
Yes.
And so elected a number of Republicans in the town of Tonawanda at that point, right?
When I left the chairmanship after 20 years, every office was still held by a Republican except one office, and that was one of the 2 judgeships we had in the town.
So every elected official but the one town judge was an elected Republican. That's not true today, correct?
That's not the case today, no. Not the case today, no.
Okay, so that is how you got involved in the political spectrum, and you've been involved in that spectrum ever since, isn't that correct?
All these years, yes. I've been involved at every level. I've held the town chairmanship plus vice chairmanships on the county level. And it's been a real honor for me to be able to do that, because I happen to love America and I happen to love our way of government, and it has been a great experience for me And I just am so proud to serve in that capacity.
We're going to talk more about that after this. Welcome back to Buffalo's Conservative Talk. There are a number of ways for you to listen to us. You obviously can listen at 1270 a.m. You can listen online at 1270thepatriot.com. You can listen on the Buffalo Patriot mobile app. And certainly you can just have Alexa say to Alexa, open 1270 The Patriot. Look, we're here with Dr. John Long, a hero in my eyes and in the eyes of many of us, a World War II veteran, 98 years old at this point in time, who served in our armed service, was willing to sacrifice his life for the rest of us, a patriot in every sense of the word. So if you have any questions or if you'd like to call in, certainly you can. The Patriot studio line is 716-500-1270. Feel free to give us a call. Nancy has a question for Dr. Long. Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, Dr. Long. My name is Nancy Orticelli, and like we just discussed on the break, I work for Assemblyman David DiPietro, and he faced a primary last year, and he gave me a pamphlet that you had written. And it was a pamphlet regarding grassroots organizations and winning elections the grassroots way. And I thought to myself, oh, what can this guy tell me? And I read it, and everything in it resonated with me because I do run a grassroots organization here in Western New York. And I just wanted to ask you about your experience with grassroots. What made you write that pamphlet? And are there ways people can get the pamphlet still who would like to know how to win elections, the grassroots on the ground, even if they're not part of a committee?
Well, I'm going to answer that question as quick as I can, but in a very broad way. Politics is a people's business. It's just that simple. If you're going to be involved in politics, you need to be able to communicate with people one-on-one and all the time. In fact, if I were, as I said, I always train my committee members to be able to knock on a door and talk to the person one-on-one. Nothing replaces that kind of communication. I know today we're getting into all kinds of different forms of communication. But I still will say, to my dying day, there's nothing better than the one-on-one, you and I facing one another. I believe that was most of my success, an ability to do that. And I believe that was the reason I had a winning organization for the number of years that I did, because every committee person was trained to be able to do just that. And I feel that in one of us today, if we would be communicating that way, we wouldn't have some of the problems we've got today. So that is basically what I say about my public service, my ability to communicate with people one-on-one.
Is there a place that people can go to get that pamphlet? Is there any way that, because people would really benefit by reading that. A lot of groups would. I think that you kept it so basic and so simple. It wasn't all these, these steps, X, Y, and Z. It literally was, like you said, communicating and being a person for the people. So is there a way anyone can get that pamphlet?
I'm in the process now of updating that pamphlet. And as soon as I complete that, probably within another 2 or 3 weeks, I will make that pamphlet available to everyone and anyone that wants to use that pamphlet, because I feel that every political leader, no matter what party is associated with, that same idea of one-on-one communicating with people, that's public service. That's what it's all about. And so I'm going to make that pamphlet available as soon as I update it with what I wanted to add to it.
All right. I'm going to hold you to that. I'll get your number and call
you. Okay.
John, following up on that, what do you believe is the message for young people today?
Love America. Love America. This is concerning me today that in our schools, when I was in schools, in elementary and high school, we had courses in school that was on civics. It's called civics courses. And we were told about America. We were told about the American flag. We were told about the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. Today, as far as I know, that is not existing. But our young people today my next generation, the next generation that's going to replace our generation, I'm deeply concerned today that the level of patriotism is not the level which I would like to see it. And the only thing I can advise is that those that are responsible for education, they've got to do something to see to it that our young people learn more about America, what America's all about, the sacrifices we've paid in thousands of people in World War II, so we have these freedoms we've got today. That's what I'm hoping can happen here in Erie County.
John, that's an excellent answer. We now have a question for you. Someone's calling in.
Yeah.
So go ahead, caller. What's your question for Dr. Long? Are you there?
Carlone. Yeah. This is Dr. Carlone.
Yes. How are you, John?
I'm good. Great.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm fantastic. What can I do for you?
You probably don't remember me, but I remember first meeting you at the District 17 meetings a long time ago.
Yes. Now I vaguely recall that. Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen you in a lot of years, and I every once in a while I catch your name in the paper or somewhere else. You're hanging in there, and it sounds like you're doing well.
I'm doing very well, and yes, I'm going to be hanging in there as long as God's willing.
That's safe. That's what we can do. Just hang on to the trapeze. That's it. It'll swing. Very good. That's great. I just wanted to say hi, and
it's very nice of you to call. I really appreciate that. And all I can ask you to do is always say, God bless America, and continue to do everything you do to keep this as the greatest country in the world.
Okay, John. So that's the message for young people today. Patriotism seems to be lost in a lot of our situation. Isn't that true?
That's absolutely true, and it really concerns me very deeply.
So tell me this. In terms of service, do you believe that service is important for young people? What about the draft versus voluntary going into the service? How do you feel about that?
What I'm going to say may not be accepted by a lot of people, but I really feel my military service did more for me in growing up and becoming a man than anything that I could have done at that time. It taught me about life. It taught me about organization and structure and responsibility. And I personally, this is my own thought, and maybe there's many that don't agree, I would love to see every one of our young people have to have at least 18 months, a year to 18 months of military service. I don't know anything that would be greater for our younger people than to do that. Not only that, but just think what that would do and enhance their views about what America is and what a great country we have here.
So that can be done in a number of ways. And we're going to talk about that after this question. So we have Sue from Niagara Falls. She has a question for you. Go ahead, Sue.
Hi, Dr. John. I just so appreciate hearing you speak, and I had a question along those lines about today's military.
Fire away.
Okay, I was just curious how you feel about today's military and our new leadership and how you think they would stack up. And I'm going to hang up so I can listen.
That's a very good question, and I will answer it in this way. I feel that we can never do enough to have the strongest military around in the entire world. And I feel today we're heading in that direction. I feel that there's many things that can be done now to enhance our military service, but I have the faith and confidence in those elected officials that will see that that happens. This is the greatest country in the world. I've had this love affair with America my entire life, and we've got to do everything we can to see to it that we protect what we have in this country, and not only that, but be sure that we're strong enough, because in strength brings peace. Remember what I said. When we have strong military, that is the best way to have the peace that we want.
So
Dr. Long, I'm sorry to interrupt, Ralph. I just want to say I feel like I'm your long-lost daughter because you're talking about civics, you're talking about your children in the military. My two children are both in the Air Force, and I run a homeschooling co-op group. in Elma, and I teach the civics class. And teaching that civics class has shown me personally what was lacking in our own school system as far as teaching children civics. The biggest takeaway I got from me teaching these homeschooling kids is we all talk about our rights. We talk about our constitutional rights, the Bill of Rights, but we forget our responsibilities as citizens. You have rights and you have responsibilities. And what are those responsibilities? Helping good candidates get elected, going to your town board meetings, going to your school board meetings. And so, you know, in this day and age, voting, there you go. And in this day and age, with the way that our school system is, they don't teach they don't teach love for your country. So me personally, I don't have a question for you. I'm just having a conversation. I encourage parents to do that in their home. You can, even if your kids go to a public school, you can do a homeschooling class on civics. And I think that's where it begins, in the home, back to basics.
You know, what you just said was so important, and I agree with everything you just said. We need to enhance, we need to do everything we can to see that these children are well aware of the greatest country they live in, but also what the price was paid so they have these freedoms today. We lost 400,000 young guys, 18, 19, my age, in World War II. Not a day goes by I don't think about that. But we must absolutely find a way with our young children to enhance their knowledge of what this country is all about, and with the price we've paid, but more importantly, how they now have the responsibility as we pass the torch of leadership from my generation to that next generation. That's something we've got to really be sure that takes place, that these people know that.
So, John, I spent 6 years in the New York National Guard. It's not, I got to admit that back then, it seemed like, every weekend I'd have to go, or 2 weeks during the summer. But I got to admit that it taught me a great deal. The training is invaluable. The commitment that you learned when you were in that service, the patriotism, the sacrifice, those are so much, the values are so important. And my 6 years in the National Guard, I was called up to fight the floods in Wellsville. That was the one thing we did. But we did other public service things. We went and cleaned the zoo. We did things for our local areas. We had a commitment. You had a sergeant, a drill sergeant. You had a commander. So you learned how that system works. And that's invaluable. Young people today don't have that. They don't understand how to take orders, how to follow, commitment, how to protect your fellow soldiers. And more importantly, maybe that commitment to service in your community. How do you feel then about whether or not that should be reinstated in some way?
You couldn't have said it any better than anybody else. It was so outstanding. I always knew there was something special about you, sir, but what you just said right now, that is what is so special about you. Yes, we have to find a way that this new generation has full knowledge, but we must also find a way to motivate them to participate in their communities, to motivate to become active in their communities, no matter what it is, whether it's the school or something, or whatever the recreation, I don't care what it is. But our young people have got to get given the opportunity. We must motivate them to do these things, because that's what's going to be happening in this country. Our culture today is going to be so important in the future, and we've got to do everything we can to enhance that attitude about what our life is all about in this great country.
So, Nance, you see it then in homeschooling and in teaching and what you just said. We lack that today, don't we? That's missing in our young people, in our teaching of our young people.
Absolutely. And I mean, the news cycle the last couple weeks has been these teens and young people running wild in the city, ruining festivals. And the solution that, Zenita Everhart has come up with is we need more programs. We need more programs. We got a program. It's called the National Guard. Go clean a zoo, like Ralph said. Go take care of your community. Do something to give back to your community instead of making new programs for these kids to go, play video games or go, do arts and crafts. Put them into service for their community, and I bet you'd clean up that issue right away.
You know, it's so good to hear you say that, because when I was a kid growing up, we had programs, Little League Baseball, Little League this. We had things involved that kids could become involved in. There's a lack of that today. I really do feel that way. And if we don't initiate those programs now, we're going to have problems in the future. But you're absolutely right what you just said.
John, I know you're big on the VA, the Veterans Administration. So tell me a little bit about what you think of. First of all, we have a VA hospital here in Erie County. What's your feeling about that?
My feeling about our VA hospital, I go up there many times just to visit, just to talk to people, and I feel that we need a new VA hospital. Somewhere along the line here, we've got to be able to have a brand new VA hospital. The present hospital is serving its purposes. I know many of my friends that have been patients there, and even today that are patients there, and the combat soldier sitting next to me is also a patient at different times at the VA hospital. So I think we've got to maintain the level of care at that VA hospital that you do in these other hospitals, because the veterans depend upon that hospital so very much. I know that. And but I just feel that we've got to do everything we can to enlarge and enhance, and I'm really looking forward to the possibility, which I've heard that there's some discussions of building a brand new VA hospital somewhere here in Buffalo or in the area.
All right, we're going to get back to the veterans in a second, but now let's take this break. Welcome back. So, again, if you want to be part of the conversation, the number to call in is 716-500-1270. So, we now, John, have Marina on the phone. Go ahead. Question.
Good morning. Yes, good morning. I just want to say, you know, I've had a love affair with the World War II guys, especially Dr. Long, for about 20 years. But I had members of my family who served in World War II, and I worked for men who served in World War II. I actually have memories of those people who served, and especially Dr. Long. And I'm going to say to our friends and neighbors, write down your stories about your family member who has served. I know Ralph's father served and his uncle served. Write down those stories, because they're going to get lost. And that's another way of influencing our young people to participate, to get involved as their family members have done in the past. So we're the last of the generations who are going to actually remember someone like Dr. Long, and we're also privileged to have him in our lives. John, you're doing a great job. I wish you had told the story about getting into the medical corps by writing to your sister to send you a certificate so you could get into the medical corps. That began your whole life into medicine and serving. But we're going to write it down so we can share those stories. And when people come up to you...
No.
What happened?
What this is all about. So, again, thanks, Dr. Long and Ralph's father and his brothers. And you're going to hear from Jim Challa, who has a wonderful story to tell.
So I appreciate that. And so you give me the opening to talk a little bit about my dad. So my father, who died in 2001, October 2001, he was a product of the Great Depression. In 1936, during the Great Depression, my father quit high school. He was one of 10 kids. My grandparents had 10 kids. And it was tough to support 10 kids in that situation. So he quit high school, and he went to work for the Emery Candy Company, making $22 a week, which actually was a good amount of money for a 15-year-old at that point in time. At 17, my father lied about his age to get a job at Bethlehem Steel as a laborer, and he was quickly made an assistant foreman. At 18, my father supervised 30 men at Bethlehem Steel. But the important aspect is, early in 1943, my father entered World War II. He was drafted into the Army. My grandparents had 5 stars out in front of their house. 5 boys went into the service. My father was seriously wounded in Normandy. He got 96 stitches in his head in an injury in Normandy. He spent hospital time all in France, in England, in the United States. He spent a total of 11 months in the hospital. Because of the GI Bill, he was able to get a GED and then went on to University of Buffalo. So it's people like my dad, like you, John, that were the greatest generation by far. And so I just, want to reiterate about the Veterans Administration, how important they are, how veterans need that association. They need the help that comes from that. They need services. People who were in the armed service, like my father, who spent 11 months in the hospital. My father had a disability through his entire life. He fought and worked hard and, overcame a lot of the disability, but it was something that was necessary. It was needed. And for so many veterans, it is needed. And Jim, when we get to you, I'm certainly sure we'll talk more about it. But, that is something that's extremely important. Now, we have another question. Another caller, Tony from Buffalo. Tony, who would you like to ask a question to?
Ralph, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Tony Farina here.
How are you, Tony?
I'm good. I'm an old friend of Dr. Long's and much admire him and have for many, many years. Hello, John.
Hello there. So nice to hear your voice. God bless you.
Thank you, John. Listening to you two is like listening to a very special generation, which I'm a part of. I'm a great admirer of both you and Ralph for all the service you've given to the community and the public and your outstanding leadership in politics and government. Ralph has been chairman of the Erie County Conservative Committee since 1991, and he's still there because he does a great job. And John, your record speaks for itself as Republican chairman of town of Tonawanda. I just wanted to call and say how much I admire both of you and appreciate your service to the community and all you've done.
You see, you are what America's all about. I appreciate your call. God bless you, and I really appreciate your friendship. God bless you.
And Tony, Tony, we certainly admire you. You're in the Broadcasters Hall of Fame. People know Tony Farina for all that you've accomplished, all that you've done. So congratulations to you also, Tony.
Well, thank you very much. But I wanted to get the call in, Ralph, because you're doing something that you haven't done before. But as usual, you're doing a very good job at it. You guys keep going. I'll listen as long as I can here. But, again, great show and great to hear you two.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to take another soft break, and then we're going to come back with Jim Scheller. Oh, okay. We're going to
change the schedule.
All right. Keep on going. All right. So now I want to introduce Jim Scheller. So he is in charge of the local Purple Heart Society. So, Jim, what is the Purple Heart Society?
It's not a society. It's just called the Military Order of the Purple Heart.
Okay.
Nationally, there's about 45,000 members, but that's just members who have Purple Hearts that joined. Doesn't mean that's the number of Purple Hearts. There's no distinction as to how many Purple Hearts were ever awarded.
What's the significance of the Purple Heart itself? First of all, I understand that it was the first honor that was bestowed on service people by George Washington, right?
Right. You shed your blood on foreign land, and that's what it's all about. Everyone that's got a Purple Heart shed their blood on foreign land.
And so, what's the purpose of your organization? What do you try to accomplish there?
We have a local chapter, and we try to go out into the schools and promote patriotism. We take this young man with us, and we teach the kids which we feel they're not learning in school anything about the wars, and we try to tell them about how important it is to remember the sacrifices of those that shed their blood for our country, for their freedoms. We then have Dr. Long give his patriotic speech, and we've got a Purple Heart plaque that we actually have in hotels. There's several developers that have them all in their lobbies of their hotels, which is great. People come in. Our desire is that if somebody sees that Purple Heart plaque, just for a minute, if they think of the sacrifices that were made by men that never came back. Not so much me. I came back. I was lucky. 57 years. I'm still here. May not make it, but...
All right, we have a question now from Dorothy from Wales. Dorothy, what's your question?
It's actually a suggestion and a question. I work on David DiPietro's Essential Care Task Force, and we have come across veterans in Western New York who are trapped in substandard living situations in assisted living facilities. And we can't seem to get anyone in Western New York interested in building or putting together a veterans assisted living like they have in Batavia. The one in Batavia is like a Taj Mahal, but we have nothing like that near Buffalo, okay? And we came across several veterans that were really suffering. One had been waiting over a year to get into Batavia, and the facility told him that he was denied. So when we went to Batavia to find out why, we found out that the facility hadn't even done an application. They were simply hanging on to him, and I'm not going to ask why. And by the time we got back to the facility and talked to them and told them that they needed to do it right away, he died that afternoon. It was on July 10th. And it was so sad. And this is not the only case, okay? Our veterans are languishing in terrible conditions. They're not getting good care. They're not getting good meals. And they deserve so much better. And David DiPietro has worked with us. Well, we actually work with him. And he's amazing when it comes to this. But he can't do it alone. And we can't seem to get the other politicians to stand with us and to help because it's the senior issue, and that's not a real popular issue.
So, look, I know it's been talked about for years about having a facility a lot closer than Batavia. Getting back to my father and my family, one of the 5 boys, my Uncle Bill, had post-traumatic stress from the service and ended up his entire life in that hospital. So they do help a great deal, but it certainly would be beneficial if we had somebody or someplace closer to us. And again, it's been talked about, but you're exactly right. It's only going to happen if people talk to their congressmen, if there's a movement to support veterans. Unfortunately, that doesn't go to the top of the list unless we clamor for it. So, Jim, what do you think about that situation?
I really think that they need to do more for our veterans. They need to have some facility closer to us, and to take care of them.
So what happens? I see as an attorney, people that end up in nursing homes, and more than half of us, unfortunately, will end up in a nursing home. That if you're a veteran, if you were a veteran with who had a disability, you can get service, but that service would be in Batavia. So your family has to go to Batavia to visit you if you're unfortunately a veteran who is in need of nursing home care. Isn't that the case right now?
Right.
Well, in this issue that Dory's talking about, I know who she's referring to because our office got the phone call regarding this veteran, and he didn't have any family So he had nobody to advocate for him. So Dory and her husband went and advocated for him, and they really did a lot of work, and that's where grassroots comes in, because they worked with their assemblymen. But by the time they were able to find out what the problem was, unfortunately, the veteran had died. So you're on your break.
All right, so we're ready for our break at this point in time. Be back in a second.